Let's go, one and all, folks. Welcome to the show. The show is called Common Threads. Wow, you hear that? There's a live studio audience right now, and you can't see them, but believe me when I tell you, my friends, one and all, they are going hyped, as I hope you are as well. Welcome to the show. This is Common Threads. We do this here live every Thursday night at 8 o'clock out of Brooklyn, New York. We are live right now on a number of platforms: Twitch, YouTube, Rumble, X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. And tonight, for the first time, this is the first time, right, Taylor, we're doing this?
First time ever.
Vertical on Instagram. Yay, thank you all so much for tuning in. I know there's millions of you tuned in right now. 2 guests, 1 hour, whole lot of fun. Some people are calling this the greatest show of all time. I can neither confirm nor deny. It is, however, a show unlike any other. We want you to sound off. Down there in the corner, you'll see a QR code. Let us know what topic you want to hear our 2 guests talk about towards the end of the show. And also throughout the hour, sound off in the comments. Let us know that you think. Correct the record. JD, you vastly got this wrong. You need a fact check. Like anything that comes to mind, your favorite jokes, your thoughts on Francisco Lindor's home run last night in the NLCS, or whatever comes to NLDS, whatever comes to mind, let us know there in the comments. Speaking of the 2 topics we're going to choose from today, each party's problem children. We're particularly proud of that one because Democrats and Republicans both got a few. They're kind of like, yeah, unfortunately, they're a part of the family. And we've also got Elon Musk's highly anticipated robo-taxi event. That is happening in just a short amount of time tonight as part of a broader conversation of Elon Musk's and his overlap with this federal election, now 26 days out. Let's bring in our guests for tonight and hear from them. Our first guest is Fred Hicks. He's the founder of HEG. He has worked on many campaigns across the United States. He is Georgia's top political strategist, according to Rolling Out magazine. Fred, thanks for being here. I got to say, Fred, before I bring in Aaron, Georgia's top political strategist. There are a lot of political strategists in the Peach State. To get the distinction of the top is no joke.
I'm honored and pleased, and it took a lot of work, and I'm planning on holding on to that title for a while.
Yeah, and I'm sure you do, and I'm sure Democrats are thankful for your effort. We've also got Aaron Evans on the show tonight. He's a longtime GOP strategist, the founder and president of Winning Republican Strategies. It's a very direct name, Aaron. There's no room for ambiguity. He's advised hundreds of winning races across the U.S. Aaron, I appreciate you being here as well. It sounds like you obviously know your way around the grand old party quite some bit. You've been doing this for a long time.
Pleasure to be on. It's going to be a fun night. Thank you.
Yeah, it certainly is. All right, let's kick things off with a look at our first topic of the night. This is, of course, storm politics. Election season is unfortunately also storm season. This is millions of residents in Florida are unfortunately being reminded here with Hurricane Milton passing through this week, just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene. There have been so many falsehoods, so many conspiracy theories, specifically about FEMA as the government agency responds to Hurricane Milton. FEMA, of course, the Federal Emergency Medical Agency. It is part of the Department of Homeland Security. Here's what Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas had to say. This kind of kicked off the whole thing in recent weeks. He said recently in a statement, "We are meeting the immediate needs with the money we have. We are expecting another hurricane hitting. We do not have the funds. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season." That then led to claims that FEMA is out of hurricane relief money altogether because according to Donald Trump, it was all spent on people who live here illegally. Take a listen.
Handle a hurricane or storm worse than what they're doing right now. Kamala spent all her FEMA money, billions of dollars, on housing for illegal migrants, many of whom should not be in our country.
All of the money, he says. In reality, there are, of course, 2 distinct separate programs under FEMA. Let's take a look at this. Here's the full screen numbers before we bring in our guest. The 2 numbers you're about to see on your screen, this is what has been spent on migrant programs in total the last 2 years. This is not from the Disaster Relief Fund. That's what FEMA is most known for. This is from the other unrelated programs like FEMA's Food and Shelter Program, which gets $5 billion a year. Here's the problem, however. For its Disaster Relief Fund, FEMA just got a recent infusion on October 1st of $20 billion. Back-to-back disasters mean they are through now almost half of all of that money in just a couple of weeks. There have been false claims that people are only getting $750 in assistance, when in reality that is not true. There is also other bits of misinformation, and they've all gotten so bad that FEMA has had to set up, and this is true, a hurricane rumor response page. I think we have the full screen for that. just to push back against claims that are made by Donald Trump and others on social media. This is the politics of storm season, folks, to say nothing of some GOP claims the hurricane is being engineered by the federal government. Yes, of course, as we all know, the weather is being controlled by Joe Biden eating an ice cream cone, without a doubt. More on that later on in the show. Fred, I'm going to kick things off with you here. Governor DeSantis reportedly refusing to take Vice President Harris's call on these storms. How do you see politics making all this worse? You're not very far from Florida.
No, I'm not. And actually, I worked for a FEMA-funded program for a few years in Florida for dealing with our 2004, 5, and 6 storms. So Francis, Ivan, Charlie, Dennis, and a little thing called Katrina that people may or may not have heard about that. And I built our data collection tools for the state of Florida for our particular funded program there. So this is something that hits very near and dear. I was actually in Jacksonville right before Helene landed, and it was slated for our home in Tallahassee. So this is very, very near and dear to me. And it's very, very sad, and I'm sounding like Trump when I say very, very. But I think at this point, keeping a fact check ledger on Trump and Vance is way more difficult than just keeping a truth ledger, because they speak way more falsehoods than they do truth. And which is it's one thing when you're talking about, some things are basic politics, but you're dealing with people's lives here. You're talking about people believing whether or not they can get assistance, people who are already in an extreme state of emotional distress, physical, and in terms of their spatial disarray. And this is a time where, if any time, we should be coming together as a country and supporting one another, not using this as an opportunity to sow additional seeds of discord and division. And so it's very disappointing, and in my mind, in my estimation, it's not because he's a Republican, it's because of what he's saying and doing. That's not presidential, and that's not leadership.
Aaron, I think we have sound. This is from President Biden sounding off about this in the last few weeks, the idea that there is so much misinformation. Let's listen to the president, and Aaron, I'll ask you about it on the other side.
For the last few weeks, there's been a reckless, irresponsible, and relentless promotion of disinformation and outright lies that are disturbing people. It's undermining confidence in the incredible rescue and recovery work that has already been taken and will continue to be taken. And it's harmful to those who need help the most. There's simply no place for this to happen. Former President Trump has led the onslaught of lies.
The onslaught of lies. Aaron, what say you here? I mean, as the standard bearer of the Republican Party, and given your longtime history with the party, I'm wondering how you see storm politics playing itself out, especially with Donald Trump.
Absolutely. And I think, look, I believe the $750 comment actually derived from Augusta, Georgia, with a speech that the vice president was giving, and it mentioned the $750. And obviously, I think there is a lot more that FEMA is giving and aid that is there for the victims. And one thing I would start off with, agreeing with Frank on is how vital, just how important this issue is. And I was doing a news interview earlier today talking about this. This should not be a partisan issue on either side. This is people. These are fellow Americans who are Democrat, Republican, Independent, non-voters who are all hurting equally right now, and both parties should really recognize that and probably step back from the rhetoric and focus on helping people. But going back to the initial claim of the 750, it was a statement that the vice president made in Augusta, and as as can happen in speeches, it was pulled out as a soundbite. That could be easily misunderstood as, this is basically what the government is offering. We do know that if, people watching this are struggling, there is much more that you can apply for through FEMA, and FEMA's done a great job in putting together some resources on their website to help you figure that out. But, I think that it really is a good reminder too, though, of, when the vice president was giving this speech, I think because this has really been taken, misunderstood by many, even before President Trump, made any statements on it, and maybe politicized by others. Ultimately, there are people who aren't applying for assistance because they misunderstood the vice president's statement and felt like 750 was all that was being offered. And so, definitely encourage people to take full advantage of the resources. And I'm very confident, I mean, Speaker Johnson has already said that when Congress does come back in, they're going to address the additional funding. I think, I have zero doubts that it will be a bipartisan solution to ensure that these victims are properly, resourced and funded and taken care of.
First of all, I appreciate your optimism. Anytime we head into a potential congressional session, we say, I've got optimism, there's going to be bipartisanship. We usually know how it goes. But I will say, I do appreciate, Aaron, that you said moments ago, I agree with Fred. That's what this is all about, because I know the two of you view things maybe differently in terms of the role, the scale, the size, the responsibilities of the federal government. But finding common ground is what it's all about. Fred, to the point of storm politics, I still remember after Sandy, I was here in New York after Sandy, the whole Chris Christie hug controversy with Barack Obama. I mean, is there something to be said about, you don't kind of want to be seen through the lens of partisanship as, dare I say, giving credit to the president of the other party? Because if you're someone like Chris Christie, I'd argue probably didn't do a whole lot of good for you. I feel like it's been a bit of a political albatross for the former governor of New Jersey, and that was well over a decade ago.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. We saw the same thing in Florida. I mentioned just a moment ago that I worked on a FEMA-funded program for our storms disasters from 2004 through 2006, those that impacted the state. And we had a governor at the time, a Republican, who has since changed to a Democrat and served in Congress and ran for governor 2 years ago, Mr. DeSantis, named Charlie Crist. And where the Republican Party of Florida started to sour on him was when then President, when Obama came in 2008, after 2009 afterwards. We were still dealing with the storm recovery process, and they hugged. And so Republicans really did not, and Florida at the time did not like that. And so we've seen that happen a couple of different times. But what we're seeing right now in Georgia is something interesting. President Trump said that Kamala Harris, the vice president, former President Trump, said the vice president and president, they're not reaching out. This is 2 weeks ago after Helene, and they can't get, no one can get them on the phone. And our governor in Georgia said, well, the president called me today and he was very gracious, very kind. He called me personally, gave me his personal number, and said that anything he needs, anything we need in Georgia, that he'll make sure we have that. So that was interesting. And that Governor Kemp decided to do that and said that very publicly. And but he also, a couple of days or a few days later, appeared with Donald Trump surveying the landscape. So he's an adroit and probably, I think, one of the most intelligent governors out there in terms of how you handle politics. But he pushed back against that piece of misinformation we call it misinformation, the lie that Donald Trump put out there, that this administration is just not being responsive. And that was after Helene ravaged Augusta. We talked a little bit about that a second ago, and also Valdosta city down in South Georgia, and went through my hometown in Southwest Georgia. So this is, storm politics is something like this. America, one of the things that's really kind of made us unique, I think, when we look across the world, and that's really allowed us to have this representative democracy that we have, is that there are times, 9/11, Pearl Harbor, after major disasters, where we at least temporarily put aside our differences and stand and support our sisters and brothers wherever they are across the country. And it's unfortunate, again, going to what I said in the last question, that there is even such a thing as storm politics, because we have millions in Florida. Over 1 million people lost their power last night. People are still recovering in North Carolina. We're still dealing with recovery in Georgia. So you're talking about 3 states right now, not to mention the other offshoot tornadoes and things like that happen, that are just hurting. And I know we're 3 weeks away, 3.5 weeks away from the election, but some things really just shouldn't be political, and we need to be lifting up and supporting each other. And by the way, unity makes for good politics in this point right now, because Democrats are going to vote Democrat, Republicans are going to vote Republican, and 2%, 3%, or 5% people say they're undecided. They're looking for leadership. They're looking for comity. And so I think that there's an opportunity here to sway this election. We're going to talk about election politics by working together.
First of all, you got a shout out in the comments there, Fred. Thank you for your analysis, says one loyal viewer. I appreciate that. And by the way, if you're watching the show, please sound off in the comments. Let us know. Let us know if you disagree with something said. If you disagree with something, it's probably going to be from me. It's not going to be from either of the guests, without a doubt. But Aaron, you know, it's interesting. As Fred was talking, I was reminded of the 2008 presidency, the campaign for presidency, the GFC, the Great Financial Crisis strikes. And I was young in my politics journey, but I feel as if I do remember this idea from the McCain and Obama campaigns, which, wow, that feels like a million years ago, that was the tone and tenor under which our politics were debated at that level, but a sort of mutual respect and a mutual understanding that in the final months of the Bush administration, both McCain and Obama campaigns had to quiet down the attacks, had to take attack ads off the air, and to put forward solutions from both campaigns and an agreement that, hey, we've got this massive overnight financial crisis rocking the system. Aaron, can something like that ever happen, whether it's storm politics or anything else, or is the genie out of that bottle for good?
Not out of the bottle for good. I mean, I believe it's a direction we need to move back into as a country. And, you know, I think we've definitely seen, you know, the intensity of politics increase, you know, drastically. And frankly, I mean, we're seeing that from both sides of the aisle, and I think the blame can be shared. You know, it's a bipartisan problem. But you know, I think a good just thought I had while you were sharing that. I remembered a McCain rally that I was at. I had the privilege of being a regional field guy for his campaign at the time. But you know, he had a rally, he had it packed full of people, and there was a couple of people that started yelling out racial slurs about Barack Obama, and McCain had a, you know, he could have kept going, and he could have, you know, let those shouts get louder, but he literally stopped the rally and called out, you know, two people that were there with his hats on and, you know, supporting him, and stopped them and called them out, and called on them to aspire greater and to return to civility and not make personal attacks. And you know, and then there was a chant that had been going on about take the gloves off, and he gave this lecture on civility. Now he also lost, right? But ultimately, I do think that you know, there's what has made us great as America. I think we've always been an imperfect country. We've always, and I think one of the things with freedom that is beautiful is we can have very strong, passionate opinions about different things, and we can, you know, get on forums like this and debate. And you know, neither Fred nor myself has to worry about, you know, going to jail at the end of this because of something that we said. But ultimately, you know, throughout that process, you know, I think that getting back to the reality that we are neighbors, we do live, you know, we're Americans first, and you know, and I think it's important. And I think, you know, things like the storm or 9/11, you know, really, there's something that brings people together beyond politics, and you know, and you always have the outliers where it does not. But you know, it's kind of sad that we have to have catastrophes in order to be brought together and have civil conversations, and just remember that regardless of what's going on with the hard left or the hard right, or, you know, any of the vitriol that's happening, we're in this together. If America sinks, we all sink. And you know, so I think we've got to get back to having some civil dialogue.
I wanted to shout out a comment we got a moment ago from Marceline, who says, I miss that kind of decency in politics. We were talking about the McCain era. Fred, here's the thing. Perception drives reality. The perception, Fred, for so many Trump supporters, for swing state independents on the margins even, anyone who listens to the messaging apparatus of Trump is convinced right now that the Biden-Harris administration has intentionally prioritized migrant lives over American lives, even if that is simply perception and does not have the basis in economic fact. Fred, I'd imagine it sounds to me like a big problem for Democrats with less than 30 days out from the election. What do you think?
Well, it is. You know, Donald Trump is a master of the media, whether you like him or dislike him. I tell people all the time that growing up in the 80s and the 90s, Donald Trump was the personification of the word success, regardless of your race, your ethnicity, right? And so he had years, decades even, of just this cultivated image of almost like the Monopoly man, right? So in a very positive way, despite or in spite of whatever was going on inside the city, and how the New York Times and other, New York City outlets covered him, his overall perception was very positive. As a matter of fact, I remind people that in 2001, when Nelly came out, the rapper Nelly came out with Country Grammar, he said he had a line in there: "Bill Gates, Donald Trump, let me in. I got money to lend my friends." And so, he was a hip hop, name and all of that. And so he has a great mastery of the media and how to move people. And so now he's taken those skills that he's honed over many years, and he's using them to talk in very apocalyptic terms. And anytime you have anything going on in the world, well, there's a certain segment of the world, of our country, that's always fearful. And then when things are happening, people become more fearful. And so when you speak in apocalyptic terms, you speak to that fear and you get people over there. So he's doing that. And I tell people all the time, and I think Aaron would agree, that in a campaign, you really are trying to do two things. Number one, you're trying to define your opponent, then you're trying to define yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's just about defining things. And Democrats have not done a good job. There isn't anything new under the sun about Donald Trump. He did this in 2016. He did this in 2020. And so I don't understand, personally speaking, right, why we don't just assume that he's going to say something or do something like that and get ahead of it and use our systems of communication to be proactive and define the issue and putting him on the defensive. We never do that. We're in a perennially sort of responsive posture, and it's very, very frustrating because listen, no one reads the retraction, right? They just read the headline of the first story, and Donald Trump is great at writing the narrative on anything. And so right now, he's pitting, long-term American citizens versus this idea of the boogeyman migrant, and trying to blame them for everything and saying that Biden and Harris love them more than they love regular Americans, and which is simply not the case. But he's saying it first, he's saying it more often, he's saying it louder, and that's why it's becoming reality for a lot of people across the spectrum, whether you're talking about Democrats, Republicans, Black, white, Hispanic, Latino, whatever. This is a real issue for Democrats.
Bill Gates, Donald Trump, let me in now. Now that is stuck in my head for the night, and I am so grateful because I had forgotten that was a song. My favorite Donald Trump music inclusion, the late great Mac Miller. A little bit younger. He's kind of my demo. I loved Mac. Mac had an entire song called Donald Trump, and it's still a banger all these years later. I'm not gonna lie. Like, you still put it on. You're kind of like, rest in peace to Mac Miller. Trump means something different now, but also just let this song go on. All right, we're gonna move on here from our first topic. An amazing conversation. Thank you guys. As a reminder here to all of our folks watching at home, scan the QR code right there on your screen. Let us know what you want to see Fred and Aaron get into for the end of the show. Each party's problem kid, and there is one for Republicans and for Democrats. What does it mean for the party? For the Elon Musk robo-taxi event and the intersection of Elon Musk and our political parties in 2024. All right, folks, heads up, interest rates are falling. You may have caught that from the central bank. Interest rates began to get cut a few weeks ago, but good news is you can still lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account from the folks at public.com. We're not just saying this because they're a part of the show tonight. We're saying this because I love Public. I have a portfolio of Public, and I could not be more excited to share this info with you. It's a pretty big deal because when interest rates drop, so can the interest, of course, that you earn on your investment. Your money makes a little bit less money as interest rates come down. However, a bond account allows you to lock in a 6% or higher yield with a diversified portfolio of high yield and investment grade corporate bonds. So while other people are watching their returns shrink in the new look interest rate environment, you can sit back and receive regular interest payments. But you might want to act fast because your yield is not locked in until you invest. There is good news, however. You can scan the QR code right there on your screen, and it only takes a couple of minutes to sign up at public.com. Again, I have a portfolio there. I've had one for many years. Absolutely love the service. Cannot recommend it enough. So go ahead, scan that code to learn how you can lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account only at public.com/CT. All right, time now for a fan favorite segment once again here on Common Threads. The great state of Michigan has 15 electoral votes for the 2024 cycle. Only 10,704 votes separated Hillary Clinton from Donald Trump in the state of Michigan. Michiganders always do this on their hand. You're just like, where are you from? It's like, I'm from here, I'm from there, I'm from this other place. All three blue wall states have Senate elections this year. We're going to focus on the one in Michigan. take a look at the 538 polling. It shows the Democrat in this race. This is Representative Alyssa Slotkin with a 4 to 5-ish point lead, about 5 right now, over the person who had her seat in Congress before her. That's former Republican Congressman in the House, Mike Rogers. Even though Rogers has scored the Trump endorsement and a cool $22 million from the conservative Senate Leadership Fund, betting markets over at Kalshi, they see things playing out a little bit differently. They see Slotkin, the Democrat, overwhelmingly the favorite at about 74% likelihood. You don't read exactly his polling, 74% likelihood of winning this race over the GOP challenger. Still an uphill battle for Democrats overall. Kalshi does have long shot odds for the Democrats to retain the Senate at only 24%. Aaron, I'm going to kick things off to you. Talk to me about your view on what the fight looks like in Michigan. And of course, Aaron, I'm sure you have thoughts. This is a wildly important state, and I just always go back to those teeny tiny margins in this state. And it just seems like these margins are getting smaller and smaller in Michigan.
No, they absolutely are. And I think actually there was just a poll that came out within the last few days that's showing President Trump 3 points ahead of Vice President Harris in Michigan. And so, to your point, you've got a lot of margin of error polling. And I think what that really shows when you see the trends where, you've got a couple polls where someone's down, a couple polls where they're up. And then, and especially when you see the difference even between some of the U.S. Senate polling and the presidential uptick. I mean, you've got a state that's very much a battleground state, very much in flux. There's a couple things I think that I'm particularly watching in Michigan that I believe could make Michigan an outlier and really reinforce some of these polling gains we're seeing with President Trump. One is just the overall support that President Trump has earned with the blue collar union workers. Again, not necessarily the brass at the top, but internal union polling showing that he's overwhelmingly favored by the majority of union workers. I think that's going to be a real key thing in Michigan, and I think that's one thing that has helped Trump make Michigan competitive in the past. And it's one of the key reasons I think he's got a real shot at winning again. The other is, looking at some of the polling that recently came out from Dearborn, Michigan, and some of those places where, the pro-Palestine vote is actually turning against Vice President Harris because they don't feel like she's went strong enough, in their direction with the war in Israel since October 7th. And so I think, these are some real issues, and I think we're seeing both of those really percolate and come to light and make this a tight state. And obviously there's, going to be a ton of money in campaigning and continued focus from both parties, as we get into November 5th.
I'm going to pull up a couple quick comments here that we got from people watching. First of all, Swamp Bug has to say, speaking of Michigan, was JD rocking a Red Wings mug earlier on the show? I was. And what this is my new initiative. I will be drinking out of mugs of every team that the New Jersey Devils beat in the Stanley Cup Finals week after week. Alexi didn't know that one was coming, dude. So we're starting with 95, and then we'll have the subsequent Devils Cups after that. No, I did have that. Also got a comment that says, rest in peace, Mac Miller. Such a good song. Yes, that's true. It was. Fred, here's the thing. And to Aaron's point about how competitive Donald Trump looks in Michigan, what's your sense on split ticket voters for a place like Michigan, or maybe your experience in Georgia? People who are going to say, hey, you know what? I do like Donald Trump, but I'm also not voting for Mike Rogers. I'm a Trump Slotkin voter in Michigan. That could happen for a lot of people.
Well, I think it absolutely could, and the polling is certainly showing that. And it's interesting how people assign certain things to certain people and not to others. What I mean by that is that the Senate, will have the final say in what happens with respect to funding for Ukraine and Israel and all these other kinds of things. I mean, the president could, the president-elect or the new president next year will be able to veto it or whatnot, but presumably they will not, and the Senate, whatever the Senate passes will be done with the idea that the president will sign it. And so the voters are protesting Kamala Harris over Israel, over something she really can't do. I mean, she can't stop the sale of arms to Israel. She's the vice president, but they're not assigning that to the Democratic candidate for the Senate. Is very interesting. Now, we used the term split ticket voter. We saw that here in Georgia in 2022 with the Senate race and the race for governor. And we talked about it in the media, local media in July of that year, that I thought that we'd have a series of Brian Kemp, Raphael Warnock voters. And here's the thing about split ticket voters. There are two types. And what I mean by that is there are people who actually split the ticket. They actively vote for a Democrat and actively vote for a Republican. And then there are those who vote for one or the other in one race and just skip the other race. And that's important to understand, because we often think about voters in terms of, will one person vote this way or vote the other way? But if someone sits out and they were supposed to vote, or they were going to vote for someone, then that's very, very impactful. And that's what we're seeing in Michigan. It's not necessarily, from what I read in the polls and the local press there, that people who are the pro-Palestinian vote is that they're voting for Donald Trump. They're just not voting for Kamala Harris. And if you talk about, I'm hearing numbers close to 100,000 in terms of looking at sitting out this election because of that, the issue, then in a state that was decided by less than 11,000 votes, if you lose 100,000, presumably 60, 70, 80% of those were Democratic votes normally, then that's more than enough to swing that election there. And that's what we saw happen in Georgia in the Senate election in 2022. Brian Kemp, Governor Kemp, received 200,000 more votes than Herschel Walker did. Same election, same ballot, statewide. And that was the difference. Brian Kemp beat his Democratic opponent, Stacey Abrams, by 7.5 points. Herschel Walker was down by about 30,000 votes and forced into a runoff against Raphael Warnock, and Senator Warnock emerged. And so, again, for our viewers, I think it's important to understand that there are two types of split ticket voters: those who actively vote for one party and another party, and then those that only vote for one and skip the other election or the other seat. And that's critical. Both of those are critical when you're trying to do your math and your calculus on how to win a race.
And I think that calculus, like, we could be sitting there a week after the election saying something like, holy cow, Trump won the blue wall states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, yet the Democrats won the Senate elections in all three of those states. Like, we could have very easily have something like that. I've seen mixed things on how competitive the McCormick-Casey race is in Pennsylvania. But let me pull up two comments. First, we got, this one. Aaron, I'm going to ask you about this one. Michigan, Marceline says, Michigan still has the Jill Stein grifting on the ballot. So, Aaron, I do want to get your perspective on third-party candidacies. Obviously, Bobby Jr. is out of the picture now, but you talk about spoiler. I'm surprised when I go back to look at 2020 and see just how many voters voted for like a Gary Johnson or a Jill Stein. Those numbers add up, Aaron.
Oh, they absolutely add up. And, as a Republican, I love Jill Stein being on the ballot. But
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. Yes, of course. I mean, look, and I think, actually, even going back to the point Fred was making about split ticket voters, I think that, Congress and Senate has super low, ratings. I mean, some of the lowest I've seen since I've been doing this for over 20 years. And then you've also got very strong feelings. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone's got an opinion, on President Trump. He's the most well-known, politician in the world. And so even those who might be undecided, they're not undecided because they feel like they don't know him. It's just deciding whether they're going to go with him or not. And Kamala's been, vice president now for 4, going on 4 years. And so she may not have quite the name ID that President Trump has, but she's still very well known. And I think people are still trying to look at, who is Vice President Harris as President Harris versus, President Biden and differentiate that. But largely we've got two well-known candidates. And so in a very unpopular Senate, a very unpopular Congress. And I think it really goes back to just the importance of both parties coming together to have real dialogue for the American people as we move beyond this cycle. Because, I think what we're seeing, and even with the independent vote, with everything, with the high stakes election that we've got ahead of us, we're seeing the American people say, look, we may not even like either option some days. They don't talk. They're ineffective. We can't get things passed in Congress. You have Democrat bills and you have Republican bills, and very little overlay from either side to actually sit down and have, some of the things that happened during the Reagan years, during the Kennedy years,
where you had both parties working together on certain initiatives that were important for the country. So, dipping back into ideology a little bit, I do think that it's a broader conversation both parties should be having, looking beyond the election. But it's definitely a very real thing, and I think Jill Stein being on the ballot definitely helps Republicans.
I gotta shout out this comment down here, because man, do I love to get into it about counties in particular. What about Erie County, Pennsylvania? They're saying the county decides the election 90% of the time. Wow, it's that. Erie County is one of the ultimate pivot counties, which people who've know my work know that I follow for a long time. Pivot counties are basically counties that have successfully in the last elections voted twice for Barack Obama, pivoted to vote for Trump. Erie County, one of the very few, I think there's like fewer than 25 in the whole country, who then pivoted back to vote for Joe Biden. So you look at an Erie County or you look at a Northampton County, Pennsylvania, you say, man, please tell me who you're voting for, because who you'd vote for is probably who's going to win the presidency. So that's a great comment. And we'll do a little bit more with the pivot counties, I think, moving on into future episodes. And what is this for Erie, Pennsylvania? Poly market? Okay, here's the poly market odds. What do they say? 57% chance of Harris winning Erie, Pennsylvania. Also, I love this. I feel like these event contract sites, like if you could think of it, you can bet on it. Like who's going to win Erie County specifically. There you go. There's the numbers. All right, Aaron and Fred, my friends, let's move on here to our second topic of the show. I feel like I'm out of frame. There we go. All right, the traditional role of legacy media in presidential election seems to be kind of weaker than it's ever been. The Harris campaign does see some value in sitting down for CBS or MSNBC, while Donald Trump is once again very angry at Fox News, surprise, surprise, and this time he's even threatening to remove the broadcast license if he becomes president from CBS. I'm not sure he could do that. Both Trump and Harris are making this the podcast election, though. Trump this week sitting down with comedian Andrew Schultz, while Harris spoke with Alex Cooper of Call Her Daddy. Take a look.
He has one ability I don't have.
Yeah.
He sleeps. He can sleep. This guy goes on a beach and he lays down on one of those, 6 ounce, they weigh 6 ounces and you can't lift it.
Yeah.
They're meant for children,
Yeah.
young people,
Yeah.
and old people to lift.
Yeah.
They're aluminum, hollowed aluminum.
Yeah.
They weigh very little. And he can't lift.
It's outrageous.
It's outrageous. I mean, daddy gang, to put it in our TikTok terms, I have seen girls on the street walk up to men and be like, do you know where a tampon goes? Do you know how many tampons we use? Do you even know how, do you know what a X or Y or Z is of a part of our, and they don't know the answer.
I was the first vice president or president to ever in office go to a reproductive health care clinic ever.
Really?
Yes.
All right, so that's a look at recent podcast sit-downs. Aaron, well, by the way, there was a lot of pearl clutching done over the Alex Cooper interview, which we could get into. Fred, over to you. How important is it, you think, for these candidates to limit their exposure at this point to traditional media if they have those concerns? And clearly they're making a play for the type of media that presidential elections before us, these campaigns really haven't had to think about everything that's out there, all the diverse offerings in terms of media, distribution, how you reach people. Seems like the old rules are kind of out the window.
Well, I think we're in transition. I wouldn't say the old rules are out of the window. We have to do the traditional and the new. And, there is a bit of a name gap difference and a familiarity difference or gap between how people feel about Donald Trump and how people feel like they know or do not know the vice president. And so she has a different burden than he does. So she has to be everywhere. She really should have been doing this probably a couple of weeks beforehand. Voting is starting, early voting, in-person voting is starting in many places, including here in Georgia on Tuesday. And so she is trying to give herself as much exposure as possible in settings that are not directly political. And what I mean by that is she's raised $1 billion or close to it, I think is what the Washington Post reported yesterday since she joined the race. And so you can run TV ads all day long. You can run your stuff on Hulu, or you can run it on different things like that, right? OTT or DirecTV, and people will sort of listen and kind of tune it out a little bit. But when you sit down and you do an interview, whether it's on a great podcast video like Common Threads or Call Her Daddy or Andrew Schultz or whatever, then that you're getting people's attention and you're meeting them where they are. And so again, Kamala Harris, she's in a mad dash right now to be as many places as possible, because there is that name ID gap, and people say they just don't feel like they know her, and they're trying to make up their minds what they're going to do with this election. But Donald Trump, you know, and for the Harris campaign, I know about going into September, they had raised about $600 million, and they did a $370 million digital buy, not necessarily that much on traditional TV. Whereas the Donald Trump campaign decided to do much more traditional TV, and they concentrated their buy in about 3 or 4 states, whereas the Harris campaign took their 370 and split it across several states and areas. So they're diametrically opposite strategies when it comes to the media, but they have very different needs, these two candidates, and what they're trying to do to win this election.
Aaron, the considerations are different than when James K. Polk ran for president to sit down for podcasts and conversations like these. Aaron, I want to put up, this is the favorability. Also, I don't know, like I'm a little tossed. Sometimes I'm like, oh, favorability ratings are really important. Other times I don't know that people really know what they are. But Aaron, what's interesting to me, so this is a 538 look at Harris's favorability. Before you see them start to switch, that line right there, that's when she was vice president. And it's like people were kind of like, meh, I don't really know much about her. I don't know what she's doing. And then Biden falters at the debate. Biden drops out. Harris is in. Now she's more favorable than unfavorable. Aaron, what do you make as a Republican strategist, and how much weight do you put into these arguments that say, well, she didn't really run for the presidency. She kind of got it in a way she shouldn't have, but clearly doesn't really seem to bother the American people who are saying, hey, we actually maybe like the vice president a lot more now than we did 3 months ago.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. And I really think that the results of this election are largely going to hinge on how effective or ineffective she is, and how effective or ineffective President Trump's campaign is in countering, tying her to the 3.5 years of the Biden administration. Or, it's been very interesting, I think, from the moment that she, slowly walked into kind of the first main press interview, and is now starting to engage the media a little bit. But the consistent message, she's been trying to really, distance herself from a very unpopular president, very unpopular administration. We've had, very tough economy, going back to, regardless of kind of the opinions on messaging on immigration, this is a problem Democrats and Republicans are showing in the polls that they're concerned with. When you have 3.5 million illegal immigrants coming across the border in 3.5 years, literally the equivalent of, I'm sorry, actually, I apologize. It's even more than that. It was over 8 million, the equivalent of 3 Los Angeles. I mean, you take the city of Los Angeles, multiply that 3 times. That's how many illegal immigrants have came into the country in the last 3.5 years. So whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, and at the end of the day, it's not about migrants. It's about illegal immigration versus legal migration, illegal immigrants coming across. And when you have that type of a stress on the system and so I mean, we're seeing those things happen. And I think many of these failures, at the end of the day, it's, does she own it, or does she get a pass and get a second chance? And I think that's really, I think it's really going to come down to, the job approval ratings more than their fave and unfave, as people really make these hardcore decisions at the end of the day on, who do I love? Who do I like? Dang it, I don't like either, but who's the least worst, for my family. You've got people, in all these different levels making these types of decisions. And I think really it's going to come down to whether she can wiggle away from the last 3.5 years with a failed presidency under Biden, or whether she can, really reinvent herself as a fresh candidate with her own ideas, and without losing, the base that Biden had left. So that's my perception.
Who do you want to have a beer with? I feel like that's the whole campaign. That's what it all comes down to. It's like, would I have a beer with Harris? Would I have a beer with Trump? Yes, no. If there's one person you say yes to, it's probably who you're going to vote for. Not to like oversimplify the entire world of federal elections down into like a drinking game, but like it is kind of like that. Okay. Okay, you guys stick around. We will be right back with both of you. I think we're ready to move on here. Yes, we are. All right, folks, listen up. Once again, time could be running out now to lock in a historic yield over at public.com. But don't worry, you can lock in a 6% or higher yield with a bond account from our friends over at Public. But here's the thing. Of course, as we know, the U.S. Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell and his colleagues at the FOMC, they just announced a big old rate cut a few weeks ago. The plan is, of course, for more rate cuts, maybe later on this year, well into 2025. Certainly good news if you're looking to buy a home. We want to see those borrowing costs across the economy come down a little bit, but it might not be good news for the interest you earn on your cash as those interest rates come down. So if you're watching this and you want to lock in a 6% or higher yield with a diversified portfolio of high yield and investment grade bonds, you might want to act pretty fast. The good news is scan the QR code, chase just a few minutes of your time to get set up over at public.com. Once you lock in that yield, you can earn regular interest payments even as interest rates continue to fall. Lock in 6% or higher yield with a bond account at public.com/CT. Scan the QR code right there on your screen to learn more. But hurry, your yield is not locked in until you invest. Need to make sure I stress that. All right, let's take a look here at our final topic, see what you, the viewer, are looking for. Is this the final choice now? Are we here? Yes, it is. We're at the final choice. 63% support, Fred and Aaron. People want to hear us get into each party's problem child. Taylor and I have been very excited about this. All right, time now to break it down. Let's take a look at our political problem children. Oh my God.
Stop.
10 out of 10 show graphic, no notes needed. If you're a member of Congress, the last thing you ever want to be asked about by a reporter in the U.S. hallway is of the U.S. Capitol is, Congressperson, could you respond to so-and-so, this insane thing that someone else in your party said? That, of course, means for Republicans a steady drumbeat of Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted this. Do you agree? And this week, that so-and-so from Marjorie Taylor Greene was, they can control the weather. Yes, of course. That's what she had to say on X. There it is. Yeah, they can control the weather. For Democrats, it's any potential fallout from New York City Mayor Eric Adams. His administration is crumbling before his very eyes while he faces bribery charges. Fred, Adams said, this is vintage Eric. That's what he had to say about himself. Are other Democrats at all imperiled by what's going on in New York?
I don't think so. Listen, right before all of this stuff happened with the comptroller, the fire, the chancellor, and all of that, Eric Adams himself separated himself from the Biden-Harris ticket and from the Democrats overall. So even though he ran as a Democrat, he separated himself from it. So he did us a big favor. And so if anyone tries to connect him to the rest of us, I just run his own clips, and Mayor Adams is not short on words, and so I don't think that's an issue. And most people outside of the big cities of LA, New York, and Chicago tend to think of mayors of those cities as being very distant and far away and not representative of anything else. And last thing I'll say is, if someone tries to connect Eric Adams to Democrats, I would say at this point only one current or recent mayor of New York City has actually been convicted, and that's Rudy Giuliani, Trump's lawyer. That's all I'm saying about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to Fred's point, Aaron, can we agree that this is such a mess? And while Eric Adams has only been charged, he's not been found guilty, and we talk about the importance of that in our judicial system, Eric Adams should resign, right? I mean, this seems to be a big issue for Democrats. But Aaron, as much as that's an issue for Democrats, Republicans got their own members. I'm sure you got a lot of GOP members who are kind of like, God, things would be much easier if certain people weren't members of our own party.
Yeah. No, look, I think, again, there's many things both we share, and I think this is a great highlight of that. But, and ultimately, I think, and there's already been multiple Republicans, especially from Florida and other states, who have spoken out about the nonsense from the Congresswoman. And, and I think, at the end of the day, each member of Congress, regardless of their party, each member of the U.S. Senate, regardless of their party, they have to stand up for what they know is the truth and what they know is right, and both for their district as well as just undisputable facts. It is an indisputable fact that the government doesn't control the weather. I mean, I'm pretty certain that that's something majority of Americans can agree on, and the fact that it's even on someone's Twitter account that got elected is very disturbing.
Okay, shout out Courtney here. By the way, touche. If someone can control the weather, why isn't Marjorie Taylor Greene, as a member of Congress, counter-controlling it? You get a vote on the House floor. You don't get a vote as a member of Congress for what to do with the storm? Come on, Representative Greene. I'd have a beer with both. I'm here for the tea. That's the way we're talking, right? I want to be a fly on the wall for whoever gets to have a drink or a cup of coffee, whatever it is. I don't believe Donald Trump drinks with both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump.
I'll tell you, Marjorie Taylor Greene is in trouble, not just for Republicans, but for Georgians. We are not proud of that one right there, I'll tell you.
Fair enough. Vonda, shout out Vonda, says she really likes the show. Thank you. Vonda, that's you and my mom and lots of others who have watched. Very grateful for that. Fred, back now to you. Fred, I wonder how you view the Republicans like a Lauren Boebert, a Marjorie Taylor Greene, some of the ones who get outsized attention because they probably intentionally say wild stuff. It keeps them front and center in the headlines. They're probably very prolific fundraisers from people outside their state who support them as a result. Unfortunately, the loudest voices tend to dominate the conversation, even if they come from members like that. Fred, how do you view that? And I sort of look at people in Congress and say we've kind of got like mini versions of Trump, right? You got like Matt Gaetzes of the world who have now fashioned so much of their personal style after Donald Trump. This is Trump's last presidential cycle. But Trumpism, I think, Fred, may be here to stay. What do you think?
Well, I think that his selection of J.D. Vance is just that. It's an effort to make Trumpism an actual permanent part, if not the dominant aspect of the Republican Party, as opposed to just being built around his personality. But with respect to the question about members in the House, listen, that's just sort of par for the course. That's the chamber where in the 1800s we had somebody cane another member, on the floor. So even though we always feel like what's happening in our lives is the worst, the most extreme thing that's ever happened, the House is the U.S. House has a very sordid history and has been littered with very interesting characters from both sides of the aisle. So Gates, shameful. Marjorie Taylor Greene, shameful. Lauren Boebert, it looks like the voters of Colorado are taking care of that particular situation there. So, you have people, again, throughout the history of the House who are just, who are truly characters. The problem is when that seeps into the Senate, because the Senate has been the chamber that tends to be more reserved, and we have traditions, and we have things that, the House is like a tempest, but the Senate is the calm. The eye of the storm. And when the Senate starts to move that direction, looking at you, Tom Cotton, looking at you, Josh Hawley, on that side of the aisle, that's really problematic. And Democrats, we certainly have had our fair share of extremists, but that's the chamber where that's not normal, that's not expected, and really should not be accepted.
Aaron, we had a comment here just a moment ago that said, I'm glad at least some Republicans are not fans of conspiracy theories. Aaron, I'm really interested how you see, not to get too ahead of our skis, obviously there's a big election coming up, but Aaron, you got to sit there and wonder to yourself, what does the future of my party look like? What does post-Trumpism look like? Is it just a new Trump rises from the ashes to take the place of the outgoing Trump? Or is there sort of like a bit of a come to Jesus moment for the GOP where they look around and they're like, okay, that was a wild ride for a decade, but we want to go back to the Romney-McCain side of things?
Yeah, I think, when you look at history, it's always a pendulum going back and forth. And I think especially, I love to read and, just the story that was even just shared, about, the senator breaking the cane and all this others, but ultimately, Congressman, representative that broke the cane. But you kind of go back through the history, and I think one of the things that actually makes where we're at right now seem so much worse than we've ever been is because we do have, everything it's on social media, it's in the media, it's front and center, and frankly, if we go back through history, both parties have had craziness and and hatefulness and conspiracies, but it wasn't all on social media. It wasn't all on front and center 24/7 news cycle. And I think that that's part of that is a good thing now that we can kind of see who to elect and unelect and not elect, and make our decisions based on them just putting their own life out there. But then part of it's also very negative because it really does, the social media never highlights, the sensible person who's really working hard for their district, getting the wins, helping some veteran, with their health care, or helping someone, get that last minute passport to, attend an important wedding overseas. Those things are never in the news. And so, I think it does kind of inflame, but it also does not negate the problem, frankly, that we have, with some of these statements. And I would also go as far as to say, working with Republican candidates around the country, no disrespect to the people in Marjorie's district, because
Sure.
Georgia's a great state, but ultimately there's very few districts in the country that she would actually be able to win as the Republican nominee. And I think that it's a result of extreme gerrymandering, both again a bipartisan problem, and you have AOC's Ilhan Omar's on the left, you have Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene on the right. And both of I would say both of those problems are equally as bad in different directions, but both are a result of politicians picking who their constituents are, not constituents who their politicians are.
Aaron, you had me until the very end. And I was sitting there and I was like, man, is he going to do this where he's going to pull in the squad and say the squad is like comparable to these other people in the Republican Party? We're out of time. But we're going to do this conversation again because I don't think it's the same. And I want to be careful, me personally. We don't conflate things. Parties have their issues for sure. But this was an amazing conversation. We do have to leave it there because we're about out of time, and I got to address a few more comments. That's Fred Hicks, founder of HEG, and Aaron Evans, founder and president of Winning Republican Strategies. Fellas, this was an awesome conversation. Very grateful to you both. Thank you, Fred and Aaron, for being here.
Pleasure to be on. Thank you.
Yeah,
Absolutely. All right, let's pull up some comments here. Let's have some fun. What are we doing here with our remaining time? Is it time for one nice thing? Oh, one nice thing. Wait, what did we, well, we had to cut. We had to get to comments. We will do one nice thing. There was actually, the one nice thing was like the whole show. I thought they were like very kind, very respectful for the most part. Like
Bring him back?
Yeah, are they still here?
Yeah, let's bring him back.
Fred, Aaron, we're almost out of time, but you're being called up out of the bullpen here. Edwin Diaz for the save. Aaron and Fred, we do this thing. I'm going to give you each 30 seconds to say one thing nice about the other side. Fred, I'm going to start with you. If Donald Trump wins this election, please give me one thing nice, something nice that's not, based on division. What's something you might look forward to if it's a Republican win? Fred, first with you.
Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a good one. You know what? Hopefully I can make a little bit more money and take advantage of those tax breaks that he'll push through.
You know what? I'm going to take it. Aaron, to you. You get 30 seconds or less. If it's a clean sweep for Harris and the Democrats, it can't be the end of the Republicans. We know it. Aaron, give me something good.
I think that she's really been leaning more into a Obama-esque message of hope, and I think having some positivity, hopefully the policies align with that. And, I also want to keep money in my pocket, but I would say, I have appreciated just the upbeat, hope message that I think we do need to hear more of in America.
That's probably the best version we've gotten yet on the show through like over a month of like, say something nice. Fred Hicks, Aaron Evans, my thanks to both of you guys again. Okay, that leaves us with just under a minute left or so. Any other top comments? They were very respectful, excellent guests, says someone down in the comments. I could not agree more. We also had some other really good ones throughout the show. And thank you so much. This was our most actively engaged show to date. We've never had quite so many comments, quite so many votes as we continue to grow this thing. Great guests, great show, lots of fun, says Nickelodeon. Out of curiosity, what was the Elon Musk thing? Well, we got less than 30 seconds left, so you're never going to know unless we put it onto next week's show. Thank you so much, one and all, for taking the time. Thank you for your comments. Please sound off to us throughout the week as well. which we've never done. But like, shoot us a note if you want us to feature something on the show. My special thanks again there to our guests. That was Fred Hicks and Aaron Evans. You can catch us here live from Brooklyn, New York every Thursday night on all those platforms. Good talk. See you out there. Make sure you vote. See you next week.